It's no small amount of tragedy that when a Ugandan travels overseas and introduces themselves to whoever they meet, when they ask them, "Where are you from?" and they said, "I am from Uganda." Unfortunately, in many of the European and North American countries, the response is very unfortunate. They usually say, "Oh, are you from the country where they kill the gays?" From that moment, that relationship begins to take on a very different tone. The Ugandan is typecast as a killer, living amongst killers or murderers, and you are labeled uncivilized and unable to take a place at the seat of those who are civil in any engagement. Because of this misrepresentation by the homosexuals and their media allies, Uganda finds itself in a very difficult place. It's denied of financial services, as exemplified by the World Bank, which decided that they will no longer provide new international financing to any projects in Uganda because Uganda passed the Anti-Homosexuality Act. This to them seems to be some kind of high liberation, similar to when certain nations boycotted South Africa during the time of apartheid, where whites oppressed the blacks in South Africa. In education, the political class also suffers both internationally. Those who apply for visas, whether at American or European embassies, to go and attend higher education in European or North American schools, find themselves with an albatross of an allegation that they are either gay killers or part of a community who are gay killers. Now, this is all absolutely untrue. The allegations that they are gays being killed is created by the fantasy and imagination of those who would seek to manipulate Uganda to abandon its course of protecting its family, culture, and its young people from recruitment into the most abject and depraved lifestyle, which they call the LGBTQ. The business, political class as well suffers the same. In international diplomacy, Ugandan diplomats or politicians who engage with Europeans and North Americans find themselves in the same position. And we see how the Speaker of Parliament, the Honorable Anita Among, and other members of Parliament were boycotted, and their business bank accounts were frozen because of accusations that they had somehow violated human rights and they were corrupt. Last year in summer, the American Secretary of State under the Biden administration, Secretary Blinken, gave a speech to the LGBTQ promoting community within the American State Department. He stated that when Uganda passed the Anti-Homosexuality Act, America took action, and amongst the actions was embargoing and putting pressure on the Ugandan Speaker of Parliament for having passed the Anti-Homosexuality Act. Well, that's not what the American embassy said in Uganda when they decided to throw the speaker under the bus. They accused her of crimes against humanity. They accused her of corruption. So, in one sense, homosexuality, LGBTQ, is an albatross that's been imposed on our educated class, on our business community, as well as our political class. This book that I have written is a book that demands an apology. It's a bold book that looks you in the face and says, it's not right for you to come from Europe and America and sit down with and conspire to change our African culture that has taken us 2,000 years at the bare minimum to develop. Who gives you the right? Who gives you the right to turn what we know as a human vice into a human right? We absolutely don't agree with that. And so I would like to say that if you're a businessman or a politician or a member of the education class or anyone connected with Uganda, perhaps you live in the diaspora and every time you introduce yourself as from Uganda, you find people telling you that, oh, you're a bad person. This book is written in such a way that it's evidence that demands an apology. It's evidence that took me 25 years to gather and 10 years to write. It's evidence that shows that there was an agenda of Europeans from colleges and politicians as well as NGOs that decided to conspire to tell Africans that we are uncivilized, to tell us that as long as we didn't accept sodomy as a natural lifestyle, we were homophobic. We were told that we must change. This book shows the utter nonsense of that experiment that reminds me again of Tuskegee, or others call it Tuskegee. In 1911 to 1915, the United States discovered that apart from casualties of war, the greatest carnage of military combatsmen was from sexually transmitted diseases, especially syphilis. And they went out of their ways to try and find a cure for syphilis. This was long before the magic shot of syphilis had been found. A group of African Americans were recruited into the experiment in a place called Tuskegee. Tuskegee was a college that was begun by an African American pastor who wanted to develop the African Americans by giving them skills and technical abilities so as to develop in the Great South. Unfortunately, the mixture of agendas, charitable businesses, Rockefeller Foundation, American military, they decided to use the Black African Americans as guinea pigs in this reprehensible experiment, which ran from the middle of 1940s all the way to 1970. Black men died painful deaths, knowing that they were being treated for a disease which they were not being treated for. And this was with the full funding and knowledge of the American government. It took courageous men and women as whistleblowers to expose this conspiracy, which at times also included some African American who had been paid to be able to fund and maintain a shroud of secrecy and the demise of so many men. It was in 1992 that Bill Clinton apologized. Quote, he said, "We as the United States government did something that was so bad, something so reprehensible. I absolutely apologize for that crime." I think this book demonstrates that Euro-Americans attacked Africa. They sought to impose a new regime of sodomy, and in the process executed it in a way that is more barbaric than slave traders. They used guns of words, labeling us homophobic, gay killers. They burnt our ability to trade, stopped our education, demonized our elders and politicians. Until just recently, when President Trump made the declaration that from now on, the United States government will recognize only two genders. It had been a nightmare of 15 years. A nightmare that was set into motion by President Barack Obama, whose executive order starting 2010-11 weaponized the United States Aid Agency, a $52 billion agency, into becoming the biggest LGBTQ club, battering Africa down and the rest of the world with LGBTQ and other impositions. But not only that, it used every department of American government, Secretary of State for Commerce, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, Secretary of Health, Secretary of Education, the FBI, the CIA, American Democratic agencies, Republican agencies. All of these were weaponized into an endless conduit that turned us into people who are to be oppressed, labeled as homophobic and unworthy of a position in civilized society. It's time to get this book out. It's time to demand an apology. It's time to reclaim our honor and dignity. And it's time to give appreciation to President Trump, whose courageous effort at weeding out the funding of USAID, which is being used to fund $4 million for LGBT in Uganda, $40 million by Johns Hopkins for changing Uganda's attitudes, $4 million in Lesotho for LGBT. We do not want this sickness. We call it confusion of the highest order. My book is called Why Are You Gay? I invite you to buy a copy of it. It's available in all places where books are found electronically, Amazon, Good African Books, as well as you can purchase it, a hard copy at $50 with shipping and handling added on. We can mail it everywhere in the world. This is Pastor Martin Semper from Kampala.